what does reclaiming real power really feel like? I mean, to me personally, that would be just this comfort. I don't know how to explain it, but
When you first started saying that, the reason I'm laughing is because I was like, oh, because I was a wreck on the inside, right? I mean, and that's how we are. I mean, we're a train wreck on the inside. And, in some cases, there's a train wreck following us, right? If we're, doing things that are hurting other people along the way, which I think we all do in varying forms. But, again, if you're somebody who's living with, alcoholism or addiction, for example, that train wreck is very visible outside of you, right? But internally, we're all a train wreck, right? Because there's a lot of pain, and it goes back, for me, the way I can best describe it, my own personal experience with it. And I've heard it described in a lot of different ways, but for me, it was literally like something that was just suffocating my heart, right? And suffocating my heart, not allowing me to be able to engage in healthy relationships. And part of that was because I didn't know how to do that, because I had never experienced that from a very early age. I lived in a very protective cocoon that I was building around myself without having any idea that is what I was doing. And so the way it feels to let that go is it's pure joy, right? To be able to go through, and I'll get pretty specific here, but to be able to go through, for me, the experience of healing the relationship with my grandfather, who was the first person who abused me as a child, to heal that relationship with someone who, when I went through that process, had already passed on. In fact, he had been dead for 25 years before I started my healing journey. But to be able to progress through what I've been through, and I describe my personal experience as chapters in my relationship with him, and they're all centered around his eyes, because I knew him when he was alive with these predatory eyes that just terrified me, right? And they came up at different times through my life. And the very last chapter, which I think is the last chapter of healing the relationship, I was in a therapy session with my trauma therapist, and I had the opportunity to see, this was in a Reiki session. When I was sort of in my subconscious state in the Reiki session, I had the opportunity to see his eyes when he was a 5-year-old boy, before he had experienced the trauma and human conditioning that made him the person who he was. So he had been this person who, I mentioned the predatory eyes. For me, he was scary, almost a monster. And I was able to see him that's actually not who he was. He wasn't born that way. He was born with love and innocence, but his experiences caused him to be a survivor. And the way he dealt with that was very painful for me and for other people in my family. Right. And so when I got to that point where I recognized him as a survivor, and that actually, seeing him as a survivor actually happened before I had the opportunity to see him as the 5-year-old, the love and the innocence. But when I recognized him as a survivor, and I realized that what he had done, the way he had lived his life, was really about survival and not about being an awful, terrible human at his core, I was able to see him that way because I knew myself as a survivor. And I knew that a lot of things that I had been doing in my life were not because I'm a terrible, awful human being. It's because I was a survivor. And I could see that in him. And it's what I call mirroring, seeing myself in you and me, both as survivors. And when I get to that place, that's when that bind on my heart goes away. I can let that go, and the person who hurt me is no longer in control of me and my behavior. They no longer impact me the way that they have in the past in an adverse or painful way. And that feeling to let go, literally, it's like a release, right? And I can just feel my heart expanding when that happens, because I've shed the control and the pain that individual has had for such a long time in my life.